I also grew up as a gay kid in North Carolina in the 80s and 90s and felt in a very personal way the power and impact of policy. And in the best of ways, I felt it because of the opportunities that were available to me attending incredible public schools. That was a period in North Carolina when we invested significantly in our public education system. But I also felt what it was like to be part of a community that was explicitly and systematically targeted by policies, to be excluded, to be degraded. And that understanding has really shaped a lot of my approach to my ministry over the years, my work as an organizer. I run an organization that works on LGBTQ equality issues across the South. And then the decision to initially run for office at the local level in 2016 and now at the congressional level in the 2022 cycle.
Welcome to the Sunlight Podcast. In this show, we're talking about taxes, money, and careers for creative people who have a big vision for changing the world with their work. I'm your host, Hannah Cole, artist, tax pro, and the founder of Sunlight Tax. If you're an artist, designer, or creative entrepreneur who wants to grow your business sustainably, manage your taxes, and build a stash of fuck you money so you can control your own time and have a bigger impact with your work, you are in the right place. Hello, welcome to the Sunlight Podcast. I am so excited today to introduce to you Jasmine Beach-Ferrara and Maggie Ullman, who are both running for office here in North Carolina, one for national office and one locally. Jasmine, Maggie, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Jasmine, will you say a little bit about yourself? And then Maggie, I'm going to ask you. Will you just tell us who you are and what you're doing, Jasmine?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for the opportunity to join y'all today. My name is Jasmine Beach-Ferrara. I am running for Congress as the Democratic nominee in the NC-11 district. I'm a working mom of three. My wife and I have an 8-year-old and 3-year-old twins. I'm a minister. I'm a county commissioner serving in local office, and I'm a proud member of the LGBTQ community.
Awesome. So inspiring. And Maggie, tell us about you.
I'm running for city council here in Asheville. Asheville's a relatively small city, about 100,000 folks, and it is the home I've built for myself as an adult. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about local politics and why they matter later, but my heart is in the work for my community. I actually worked in City Hall before. I started the city's sustainability department. I was actually the first person in the Southeast with a title like that. So we had to cut a lot of trail to figure out how local governments can match the moment of our changing world. And I've been hooked ever since about serving my community that way. I also work with national and international nonprofits on climate change, where I build coalitions to address climate change. So I feel like the local work just fuels me so much. And climate change has been my passion for so long, and I'm excited to serve so that I can address all the needs that my community needs, as well as climate change.
I love that. That's so inspiring. So I want to, just for those listeners here who are like, wait a minute, this is usually a show about, creative people's issues and taxes and money. Like, why am I bringing on two people who are running for office? So I want to take a couple minutes to sort of orient everybody to why this feels so important and so timely to me. First of all, just from the orientation of a tax professional, I just want to say that the tax code actually has built in some white and patriarchal bias. Some of that is debatably deliberate, like leaving off agricultural and domestic workers off of Social Security in 1935. And some of it is simply a product of who was in office when those laws were written, right? If no woman was in Congress when we wrote the tax code, you can pretty much expect that women's voices are not represented in it. So just as an example, so representation matters. When we don't have women, BIPOC, historically marginalized people in office, we don't have the full spectrum of input necessary to make laws fair for everyone, no matter how good we're trying to be. And I think that, like, just people listening to this show, you have more power than you think. We tend to focus a lot on national elections when most laws that affect us are actually local. And I just want to, kind of bring up the question, like, why should people care about these midterm elections? And how can people show up to get their candidates elected, both if you are represented here in Western North Carolina, hopefully soon by you, Jasmine, and you, Maggie, or wherever you are listening from. So the reason that I invited you both on the show is that my work is about economic empowerment for people who've traditionally felt left out of that. I like to say that money is not the destination necessarily, but it is gas in your car, right? You're not going to make it there if you don't have it. And so you need it. And I really want people who have a big vision for a better world to feel more comfortable with money and the power that having money brings, like being able to run for office, or to help people run for office who you believe in and you feel represent you really well, which I will say of both of you, you do that for me. So, and this is all basically so that we all can have a bigger impact on the world. So I'm interested in the vision that both of you have running for office, but also just like more broadly, like what inspires you? Why are you running now? Why is now the moment? And what do you want to see? I also, I like to talk about representation, who you represent, how you want to be a representative, and how you plan to do it. So Jasmine, I would love to start with you. You're running for Congress. I mean, that's super, super exciting. Can you talk to us about what your vision is, Jasmine?
So many great points about the way that politics and policies impact our lives in so many different ways. And that's really sort of was my entry point into politics. Part of it was very functional. I was raised by my mom, Martha. She was a single mom and a nurse. And this was the 80s. So wherever she went, I went. That was childcare. And one of the places she went was volunteering for political campaigns. So I kind of grew up getting some exposure to Democratic politics in North Carolina against the backdrop of the 80s and 90s. So saw it from an early age and was sort of intrigued by that world. But in a much more concrete way, I also grew up as a gay kid in North Carolina in the 80s and 90s and felt in a very personal way the power and impact of policy. And in the best of ways, I felt it because of the opportunities that were available to me attending incredible public schools. That was a period in North Carolina when we invested significantly in our public education system, and opportunities opened up for me that otherwise would not have been available based on my family background. But I also felt what it was like to be part of a community that was explicitly and systematically targeted by policies, to be excluded, to be degraded. And that understanding has really shaped a lot of my approach to my ministry over the years, my work as an organizer. I run an organization that works on LGBTQ equality issues across the South. And then the decision to initially run for office at the local level in 2016, and now at the congressional level in the 2022 cycle. And I think that tension, which has always been true in American life and American history, will politics be used to help elevate people and help them thrive, or will the politics be used as a blunt instrument to demean and degrade people, is being felt in even more real ways right now in this moment in our country. And that's a lot of what motivated me to jump into this congressional race. For those who are not familiar with North Carolina politics, one of the reasons you may be aware of our district is because we're currently represented by Madison Cawthorne, who rose very quickly to national renown based on both his extremist politics and his really reckless, irresponsible behavior in office. He was preceded in the seat by Mark Meadows, whose name may also be familiar because of the role he played in the final years of the Trump administration, and specifically around January 6th related events. So Western North Carolina has become a really ground zero for a very dangerous form of political extremism that in no way represents the people or values of this region, but was really a function of gerrymandered political maps. And one of the many reasons I jumped into this race back in 2021 was about wanting to show who we truly are here and what we can do together, and wanting to be part of the movement we've got to build in regions exactly like this, to not just defeat that extremism, but to offer an alternative that's based on the values of love and hope and empathy, and based on how we approach policy from a perspective of moving forward together, but also making sure everyone has an opportunity to thrive. So those are some of the reasons I got into the race and some of what's at stake in the race. I'm currently running against another extremist named Chuck Edwards, who is really very much part of the legacy of the Mark Meadows, Madison Cawthorne branch of politics. So this election offers a very stark contrast between the extremist policies of my opponent, Chuck Edwards, And what we are running as a grassroots campaign that is on fire across the district, people stepping up in amazing ways, based on how we move forward together and how we create tables where we're hammering out solutions to the issues that are front and center in the lives of folks across our district right now.
That's awesome. It's so inspiring. And I feel really proud to hear you speak as a person in the district that you will represent if you are elected, which I'm very confident and happy and hopeful that you will be, especially given who's been representing me. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we can do better.
Yeah, I did too. I think a lot of us do. Maggie, will you talk to us? So you're running in a much different kind of a race. So I'm really curious. Can you talk to us about your vision, and then we can kind of expand out from there?
Sure. Well, and just to build slightly on what Jasmine is saying, I feel like we all are impacted by policy decisions at every level, local to federal. Mm-hmm. And some of us are impacted very harmfully, like Jasmine, you were saying, your experience growing up. And, you know, Hannah, when you brought up how the tax code impacts all of us, but it was built by some of us, right? For
Absolutely.
Few of us. And so really, the more I've learned about what decisions are made at what level, it's gotten really exciting to me about, hey, at the local level, I can actually pitch in to make rules that support more and more of us. And I think the audacity of belief that I could be part of that comes from just an early age of where I started my path. I remember being like 15 or 16 and my big sisters were going off to college, and I was like overlooking their shoulders and going, oh, one day we need to get a job in order to survive. We're going to need to make money to do life. I wonder if I can game it so that the thing I do to make money makes me happy and makes the world better. Mm-hmm. And so from a really early age, I had this like practical analysis of like, I'm going to be the greatest lover for positive change I can be. And that's evolved a lot. When I was at UNC Asheville as a college student, I did climate change organizing. I worked in City Hall as a staff person, bringing some of the first policies in the South that were representing the environment and sustainability. And now as I've aged and I have spent time part of this community for 20 years, I started building my family with my 9-year-old daughter, who Hannah is best friends with one of your children. And I see what our community is like. And I see what the policies are at the local level and what they're currently doing to meet the moment of challenges we experience versus what they could be doing. It really emboldens me to start building a vision that's bigger and bigger for our community. And when I think about what we need in Asheville and the government's role, the local government, mm-hmm. I think of government to make everyone's life easier, healthier, and safer. Mm-hmm. Like, wouldn't that be cool? Wouldn't that be great? Like literally when you're on our sidewalks and roads, you feel safe. Yeah. Because we built it this way for people. Or like, wouldn't it be really cool if in the face of our changing climate, which we know is already wreaking havoc, our neighborhoods felt safe and we didn't feel like there would be winners and losers when there's disasters? Like, wouldn't it be really cool if we could all afford to live in the place we work and where we want to be? And right now those rules aren't set up that way. Mm-hmm. And I know government has limitations, especially at the local government. There's huge market forces and big system forces in play. And I'm not saying they're evil or bad. I understand the limitations, but I get really, really excited when, Jasmine, you're a congressional candidate and I'm just like a neighbor and we run into each other. Like you could call Asheville's mayor right now and probably get lunch with her within a month. And no, that isn't the same for all of your listeners. When you live in really big cities, it's probably a little different, but it's not maybe that different. There's ways to plug in and contribute. And that just inspires me so much to wake up and do this stuff every day.
I love that. That's so cool. So a really practical question, and then I want to get into this juicy thing that you just dropped on the plate, which is like, what could local government be doing? That's so exciting to me. But first, I just want a little orientation because, when you talk to people about voting, about a midterm election, for example, I think a lot of times people are like, can't name their district, and if they can name maybe who's running for national office, but they don't know anything about the local races. And, you know, I'm going to put myself in this boat too. I try to stay informed, but I usually am informed several months before the race, not like all year long, right? So Maggie, can you just orient us a little bit literally to nuts and bolts of like, what does city council do? What, and I don't know, because it's, you know, the audience listening to this, not all of them, most of people are not coming from Asheville. So I'm curious for a second about what Asheville City Council does, but then in general, what city government, like at the city level, what happens?
Sure. I think you're calling out an important thing. You know, cities do have a real range depending on where you are of what their quote unquote job description is. So, and I think that's beautiful, right? Like the cities are diverse and we're different. We're not all rubber stamping. We shouldn't all be serving the same way.
Yeah.
But in Asheville, the way our government structure is set up, some of the really most important places the city influences through policy and regulation that shape our community are through our infrastructure. We produce your clean water to drink. We build your roads and your greenways and your sidewalks. We serve you with transit, so transportation infrastructure. Another big role that we play is community safety through fire and police services. And then how our communities are physically built, we intervene and guide the development and building of our community with the private sector. So zoning, land use planning, those type of regulatory and an incentive structure. So in a booming city like Asheville, where we've grown, I moved here 20 years ago, we had 74,000 people, and now we have 94,000. That's a pretty rapid rate of growth. Mm-hmm. So as our physical environment grows, the city guides and regulates that. In other cities, you see cities run the school systems. You see cities run public housing. You see cities lead port authorities, or, you know, the flow of goods and services, airports. So those are some that, depending on where you are, fall under the leadership of city government. But very consistently, you see fire and police, you see development, regulation, you see some of those infrastructure pieces I mentioned.
Cool.
Jasmine, what am I forgetting? I mean, you serve at the county, which is different than a city, but that's another local office. And I know counties and cities that's kind of like a graduate level conversation your listeners might not be up for, but
yeah, no, but I'd love you to touch on it because yes, Jasmine is currently serving for Buncombe County. So like, you know, county level politics, a lot of states orient that way too. Can you say a word about that, Jasmine?
Yeah, well, Maggie did a beautiful job summarizing a city focus. The simplest way I've heard the county work described is, does it have to do with people? Then it's county, but it's not quite that simple. Of course, some of the primary areas that we do work in, we help administer funding for local school systems, including local supplements. We do really significant work around expanding access to early childhood education. We do a lot of work around affordable housing, some current initiatives locally around doing a lot of building of affordable housing, but broadly speaking, that's something counties can work on. A lot of work around economic development, how we bring and create new jobs that pay enough to raise a family on. And then the county is really, in North Carolina, at least, sort of an arm of state government is one way to think about it. So a lot of what we do is sort of also mandated in terms of public health services, Department of Social Services, and sort of related services that essentially are about kind of what happens, for instance, when a pandemic shows up and the county was on the front lines. Counties are often on the front lines of responding to moments like that, or disaster preparedness kind of work through emergency management services. So every county is structured a little differently in every state.
I would really love to just revisit that thing, Maggie, because you said it and I was like, oh my gosh, wait, I need to hear about that. You were talking about what can be done. So you were saying like what is done at the city level, and they're like, you just mentioned like the possibility. And I know that you were a person, I mean, I'm just going to say this, you might not say this, but like one of the reasons that I am voting for you, that I am knocking on doors for you in 2 days and have been in the primary, is because like you've got the receipts, you know, maybe that's a tax person's analogy, but like we all have great ideas, right? But you have a long track record of working to implement those ideas and coalition building and getting, you know, like working within laws and building systems. And so what I always love about you when you're at a candidate forum is Maggie is the one who's like, yes, I believe all of those things too. And here's my experience and what I've learned along the way. this is how I see it being really like moving through effectively and like building up the support needed to actually get that thing passed. So anyway, that's my little plug for Maggie.
Thanks, Anna.
Will you tell me about that bigger vision? Like what is possible? What could a city do? What are cities, maybe you don't have to be specific to Asheville, but like, what could we do that maybe we're not doing now?
So I appreciate that you preface that question with like that I show receipts, because I'm gonna share some like big ideas, and I'm okay with big ideas, and I realize they could be 20-year ideas. And I pride myself on being realistic and practical, but I also think we need to be dreaming. So some things that I think about when I came to this town 20 years ago, the idea of our local government supporting affordable housing that wasn't just through housing projects in the like local housing authority, that wasn't a vision yet. That wasn't an idea. And we had some visionary leaders who started saying, wait a minute, the government should help our people, our police, our firemen, our teachers be able to live here. And now it's not a question of if we should support it with our resources, it's how much and when. That's what I'm talking about, right? So when I started the first sustainability office in the South in 2008, it was let's try out and pilot what it looks like for local government. Right now, it is not a given that local government, that local taxpayers pay for local climate solutions. That is not a given in our budget structures. In 10 years, I want it to be not if we do that, but how much. Local governments need to step up beyond just responding to the emergencies, but to prepare. I also think we look at our public space and assume it always needs to stay that way. If you look at any city, the amount of roads that are basically dedicated for cars swallows up an enormous proportion of our public land. I drive a car. I'm not afraid of cars. I'm not hounding cars. But couldn't it be better if we use that land for other things, at least sidewalks, so that folks who don't have a car, don't want a car, can safely get to where they're going? So there's ways that we can really think about building our budgets to match the moment, about changing the way things have always been done to match what need to be done. And I think that unleash big ideas for people to trust, even dabbling towards them, you need to be ruthlessly practical. And you need to listen really hard, because big ideas are very scary to a lot of people. And it's not okay to just bully your way towards a big idea. You really need people to understand the why and want the why. And so I think really understanding what the job is of local government, how to get there, what the first domino steps are to move towards that, make it safer for people to say, I'm ready to dream too. Because sometimes we dream and we don't achieve it, and that's disappointing. So you can't disappoint your neighbors. You got to really build it.
Oh gosh, I can feel your coalition building skills just like in your answer. It's really inspiring. I will also just say for the listeners that so my daughter and Maggie's daughter are best friends. And Maggie was explaining to my 8-year-old daughter about climate refugees. And I was like, oh, I think so she's speaking to an 8-year-old because she is, but I was like, I needed that at that level too. I mean, you were talking about like climate change, which I think is becoming more and more visible to all of us. Right. And, we've seen in Asheville, we've seen major flooding or surrounding areas, like big flooding and some effects, but you were talking about, Asheville's high up in the mountains. It's not on the sea. It's not on the ocean. So sea level rise is not going to directly hit us. But you were talking about, well, where are the people going to move who live on the ocean? And I was like, oh, right. So anyway, your ability to coalition build, it was including the 8-year-old set. And I was really appreciating that.
Well, they're going to take over one day. We got to get ready.
Yeah. Well, as part of why we need people who, inspire them in office. I'm curious, Jasmine, I'm sure you also have some thoughts on like local politics, but just to kind of widen the lens here, like how does this stuff translate when you move from local office to national office? And what do you, the world has shifted, politics has shifted. What is possible now in national politics running for Congress? What is your vision for that?
I think a lot of what is so both historic and compelling about this cycle is that there are two vastly different stories
Yeah.
that come next, depending on what the outcome of this election is. And that's true at the federal, state, and local level, but it's certainly true at the federal level. It's true in the congressional race I'm in, but it's true in races all across the country for Senate and Congress, is that the choice is between a far right extremism that wants to double down on the Dobbs ruling, that wants to, see the freedom to marry taken away, that wants to restrict access to contraception, versus a vision that is about protecting those rights at the federal level, that is about tackling climate issues as the crisis that they are. I think so many of the themes that Maggie brings up absolutely apply in our federal politics. And my perspective is more of them actually should. I think what happens in our local politics is a really excellent sort of medicine for what's broken about our federal politics right now. And then part of what continues to be such a great honor about serving on county commission, and many of the lessons I'll bring with me if I have the honor to serve in DC, which is that it's so immediate here. A policy idea gets introduced and it gets debated and discussed and argued about and workshopped by folks who are impacted by the issues, by folks who will have the task of implementing the policy at the staff level at a city or county, and then by the policymakers. And then, you end up with a version of it. And what happens after policies get passed is, to me, actually one of the most interesting pieces of what governments do and what elected officials are responsible for, but we don't talk about it as much. We talk about the big push to win something.
Yeah.
But actually what happens in the implementation stage is we learn a lot about what actually works and what doesn't, what some of the unintended consequences might have been, and how we can make it better as we move forward. And all of that process, which kind of plays out in very immediate personal ways in our local politics, is often really removed from people's lives at the federal level. And I think the more we can bring people into that process at the federal level and mirror some of the things we actually see happening at the local level, I think that's one of the ways we help sort of steer our country back towards or forward towards where we need to go. So, to me, in terms of your question of sort of what's on the line, everything's on the line. And what happens in this cycle will absolutely set the stage for the 2024 cycle and the presidential elections there. So, the work we have to do is not sort of one and done in any given cycle, especially in places like North Carolina, where, we see American politics kind of played out in their full contradiction and tension and beauty every day as you're talking with folks here. Places like this, the work has to be continual and eternal. It doesn't ever go away. So, I think those are just some of the things that come to mind listening to Maggie and thinking about the ways that what's happening locally, I think can at its best help improve what we can do at the federal level.
That's awesome. And Maggie, I think you wanted to add something to this.
Just how, part of what you're talking about, Jasmine, I'm guilty of, like, as a citizen. And like you said, Hannah, like, I know a lot about local government, but I'm really intimidated about figuring my way into supporting federal changes. I get overwhelmed by it. I don't have the knowledge. And like, I think I'm a pretty smart person and I know this lane. And just what makes me so excited about your leadership is, like, through this campaign, you're making it really accessible to people. Every time I knock doors with you and your team, it's a conversation. It's not just like a transaction that you're asking of volunteers. People are included. You're sharing all this knowledge. And I think that insight you have of the more accessible leaders can make the conversation at the federal level, the better policy that you'll be able to do is really hopeful. And I don't think we see from a lot of congressional leaders. I think they see it as my job is to show up and vote. But I don't know. I feel like you're going to serve us really differently, and I'm hopeful for that.
I so agree with that. And I've knocked doors for you, Jasmine, as well. And I like your script and your training. It's very clear that it's not just about us telling the person whose door we're knocking on, but it is about listening. And that's I've knocked on a lot of doors for a lot of people, and that is not universally true. This is just my take on this. It's one of many, but to me, like, in a world where people get to run for office who might not look like the way people who ran for office 50 years ago, it's maybe we don't take for granted that that we're just going to be let in. And I really, I think that both of you are running campaigns where you are really doing the work. There's no privilege to your campaigns. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, we're all white in this space. There is that privilege. I want to acknowledge that. But what I mean is, like, there's no sense of entitlement to it. I really see, like, I'm going to listen. I'm going to learn. I'm here to, to show up for the people I represent. That's what I see in both of you. Does that feel fair?
Well, I think that's a huge piece. I'm so glad you brought this up, just in terms of like how we change narratives and how we change how we change the message people hear. The reality is that let's just start with kids. So many kids continue to hear the message of, well, someone like you can't. And that someone like you can mean a lot of different things. It can be because of the color of someone's skin. It can be because a kid is queer identified. It could be because of where their family was born, or they live in a single wide trailer. I mean, there are a lot in Western North Carolina. There are a lot of different reasons people hear that message, but people certainly hear it in our politics. This district has never elected a woman, never elected a person of color, never elected an out person Congress. And I think part of the response, or sort of breaking the mold, is about proving the viability that's possible and demonstrating that lots of different kinds of people can build viable, strong, competitive campaigns. And that's how we change the story. We change the story by doing it. And for me, that's sort of a huge motivator, not just around this, but around how we support each other's campaigns. There's a really extraordinary camaraderie happening in Western North Carolina right now between candidates up and down the ballot, really supporting each other, linking arms, getting out there and coordinating campaigns, a lot of stuff that isn't typical and doesn't usually happen. And is a testament, I think, to the people who are running right now and their campaign teams. But it's also part of how we break these patterns and change these stories and truly strengthen kind of that longer term work of creating representation and ensuring that in any room where policy is being made, as one of you put it so eloquently, in any room where policy is being made, there's at least one person, but hopefully more people who bring a lived experience to that, or an allyship. We need to be thinking about racial equity. We need to be thinking about economic equity as we're drafting this policy on X, Y, or Z.
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah. Well said. I'm really interested, we've been talking about the campaigns. We've been talking about this truly beautiful coordination and camaraderie between campaigns that, Jasmine's campaign just hosted this mom's night out last week, and all these candidates who are moms or mom adjacent were there, and it was so much fun and so incredible. And it just it really inspired me to be like, oh my gosh, right. The whole point here, we're all in this together. Maggie has her lane that she feels super good at and competent at. Jasmine has her lane that she feels really competent and excited about. Me, I'm on the back end knocking on doors for both of y'all and talking about taxes with people, but still, it just, the project it's a group vision, and I really appreciate that. So as we're talking about the campaign, something I really want to talk about, especially because a lot of people listening to this podcast are quite politically engaged and active. Now, I do think that tends to bias towards national, in part because local media is gone and it's really difficult, or not gone, but deeply diminished. And it's just harder to hear about local politics. And so I think a lot of us tend to focus on national campaigns when actually we could have so much impact locally, but we aren't really aware of what we can do. Can you both talk to me about just a person who's sort of sitting at home, steeped in anxiety, worried about the election? What can a person do to help elect people who they believe in for office, whether it is the two of you or, somebody who's in another state? Maggie, will you go first?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm going to say something. Here's what I would say. Anytime I talk to someone, whether it's about supporting elections or having 20 years of being a professional, quote unquote, do-gooder, I talk about finding your seat on the bus. Mm-hmm. When I was in college, I worked in a water testing lab. Being a scientist is not my seat on the bus. That's not where I tried. Don't do it again, right? And so I think whether it's campaign or just being part of your community conversation. What's your seat on the bus? I like knocking on doors. It energizes me. I learn and I listen. There are many people you couldn't pay to do that. So like, don't beat yourself up. If that's not your deal, that's fine, right? There's a lot of the skills that we look for in campaigning that, you know, getting out and about, knocking doors, working at the polls, making calls, that might not be your skill set. If it is, we need you like 15 more hours, please, quickly, and show up that way. But if not, that's okay. You know, what is your deal? Do you like to write? Write thoughtful stuff on social media. Do you like to write? Write to your local weekly newspaper. Mm-hmm. Do you like to have friends that trust you? Bring up these conversations. What is authentically your way of participating in our community, and lean as hard as you can into that, acknowledging that the things you typically hear, like knocking on doors, that might not be where your gifts are, but if they are, we'll take them.
Fair. Jasmine?
Yeah, I mean, Maggie said it so well. And you know, one of the wonderful things about campaigns is there are a lot of different ways to get involved. And I think, I mean, I'm going to kind of go in hard on the plug for the door knocking. It is not for everyone, but it is for a lot of people. And the amazing thing is that it's like having a conversation at the grocery store with a stranger, which anyone in the South knows what I mean when I say that, which is like, sometimes you just strike up a conversation in the cereal aisle with a stranger and it's 2 minutes long, but you both leave kind of smiling. Mm-hmm. And, you know, really what this is about is us getting out there and having conversations that I think are powerful and impactful for two reasons. From an impact perspective, there is no more impactful way to turn out the vote than through those personal conversations with targeted universes of voters. So I think one of the things that we need to just be really direct and forthright and relentless about is that there are ways to win elections, and doubling down on creating this culture of like, we need people not just to show up for the fun stuff. We need people to show up for the stuff that will really move the needle on turning voters out. And that's door knocking. And it can be a lot of fun also. Mm-hmm. But the other piece is, and part of what, especially in this cycle, motivates me so much about getting out there and knocking doors. And I've been doing it for the last 18 months in every corner of Western North Carolina, you know, walking down long driveways and sitting on people's front porches, is that in this moment, we are hearing so many messages that we should not talk to each other. And that if we do talk to each other, it's going to lead to an argument or a fight. So many messages that people on the other side of issues are fundamentally not just wrong, but irredeemable, which I think is one of the most dangerous messages that we can kind of, that can be spread in our shared public life. And the single best way to counter that is to get out there and have a conversation with someone. And 9 times out of 10, you will find that there is a common ground to talk about, or a common experience. And if you start with the question of like, what matters to you, it will open up folks, in many cases, being ready to talk a bit about who they are and what matters to them. So we don't just need people out there knocking doors with us because that is truly how we win. We need it because it's truly how we change the tenor of what our political life and thus what our shared public life is like right now. So I think that, you know, it's a both and, like, as Maggie said, we need all hands on deck, and we need event planners. We need people sending donor mailings. We need people writing letters to the editor. We need people who like being on social media and all of that. And for this final 3 weeks, as we head into the get out the vote effort, we need, you know, as many people as possible out there knocking doors and having those conversations, because, you know, midterms are elections where we typically see lower turnout than presidentials. And that is actually sort of one of the most, the most powerful levers we can pull, which is that the more we can approximate the turnout that happens at a presidential, meaning people who are voters, they just usually don't turn out for midterm. The more we can get those folks to turn out because they know what's on the line with reproductive justice, they know what's on the line with climate, the greater the likelihood that we can win races, especially tight races where we might not usually have the same opportunity.
Yeah, well said. I will say personally, as a person who has knocked on doors and who has had anxiety about it, that I do always come away with it feeling better about the world. I mean, that, and truly, that's not something I'm doing for the campaign. That's something the campaign is doing for me. So I
find really like surprising maybe when I'm knocking on doors is that if I just paid attention through news and social media, it feels like we are really, really disconnected.
Mhm.
And when I knock on doors, I see how many people understand the gray zone on really complex matters. I see how reasonable people are and how empathetic people are. And it gives me a lot of hope. It charges me up to be like, okay, all right, that news article that I read first thing, I'm not even out of bed and I'm starting to panic about the world. When I get on someone's door and we're talking, it just reaffirms that I think people are good, and being connected is a nice way to remember that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, as a person who moved to Asheville from New York City, I had this impression of like rural North Carolina people that was based on, the news media. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get shot if I like walk in the country, that's a really bananas attitude to have. And it's really funny. And, I talked to people from back home and they still carry those assumptions. Right. And, city people think country people are scary. Country people think that city people are scary. And you actually get out into it and you realize like, oh, right. Yeah. Like everybody basically wants the same thing. Everybody wants dignity. Everybody wants their family to have what they need. We're all so much more the same than we are different. Well, I'm going to let each of you say a couple closing words if you want to. I just want to say how inspired I am by the two of you both, like the way that you show up in your campaigns, the way that I know that you will show up if elected. And, I'm talking to people all the time about, I care about politics partly because I teach tax, right? Like in tax is how we fund the policies we want in this world. And I think it's really bananas that we don't teach taxes in high school, because how can you have fair laws when the basic populace doesn't understand the thing that funds all the laws? So to me, this work really matters. And the work of teaching people financial security, basic personal finance education and how to manage your taxes. This is so that you can fund your vision in the world. I mean, that is the point, right? And so to hear the visions of the two of you, to me, is really inspiring. And I hope to the people listening here, it is inspiring to you to see what these two incredible people are doing to put forth their visions into the world. And then, of course, it's on all of us to help get them elected. But I would love to hear, Maggie, let's hear from you first. And then Jasmine, I'm going to ask you, I'd love to just hear a couple of your parting words, last thoughts.
It reminds me of when we were talking around the fire the other night, Hannah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we think of taxes as this evil thing that we have to do. I encourage you to think of taxes as what they are. You're chipping in for the public good.
Mm.
If we all chip in, we can have roads that aren't private. If you all chip in, we can have safety, not a police state from neighbor militias. If we all chip in, things can be better. And I take it really seriously when I chip in, even when it pushes me financially. And I take it really seriously how we're going to govern those resources that we've all agreed as a society is better for us if we steward together. So just to kind of build off of the place that you work and give in society, Hannah, understanding taxes, understanding how we contribute to that, it's us paying for the communities that we want. And I hope that you can feel empowered in understanding that system, because you're already a major part of what we're doing to better society by contributing as a citizen. And the more we can understand and be empowered by that, the better it's going to be. So thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
I love that. I just to tag off of the tax thing that you just said there, Maggie, I think, taxes is your mandatory civic duty. It's the part you don't really get a choice about. But here, elections, this is the choice part. This is where you get to decide how we direct those, who you want to be guiding how we direct those taxes. So this is the choice. And, you don't get to sit out taxes. You get the privilege of sitting out elections, but we really hope you don't. We want your representation. So Jasmine, I would love to hear from you, just kind of some words of closing, what you think.
First of all, just thanks for the opportunity. And it's always just such a pleasure to get to do things with Maggie out on the campaign trail or interviews like this. And Hannah, thank you for sharing this platform with us and to folks who are listening out there. I think the message is kind of really echoing what Maggie said about, we need all hands on deck, and the movements we're building become stronger when we have all hands on deck. And I'll put in a particular plug for, I think when artists are in the room is always a better place. And when artists are at the table, what comes next is always more vibrant and creative and interesting as a result. And we need that in our politics as much as we do any other part of life. So, I think as I understand sort of the theme of your podcast, it's really about sort of how do we deconstruct the tax code to make it accessible and sort of be empowered in navigating it. And a lot of that also holds to our politics, certainly, is how do we deconstruct a system that at times is used to try to keep us alienated or excluded. But that, in fact, like any system, there are ways to understand and navigate and improve and make more accessible and sort of break open new possibilities within. So the election cycle that we are in the closing days of, 27 more days till we know the results, really will write the next chapter of our shared American story. And there's two very, very different versions of that chapter. I think what I feel above all else is a sense of both hopefulness and a sense of keen responsibility around that. But the hopefulness is generated because of conversations like this, because of what it's like to be out there knocking doors in Swain County and having conversations with folks about what matters to them. And the readiness that I see from so many people to keep believing in what we can do together and not to turn their back on our responsibilities to each other, but also on the possibilities of what we can make happen. So thanks for the opportunity to kind of take a deep dive on all of this. It's been a wonderful, inspiring conversation.
Awesome. You've really inspired me, both of you. I feel energized for a weekend of knocking on doors and writing a letter to the editor about, about this election. So if you are listening, I want you to take a look at the show notes today. I'm going to include some links to Jasmine Beach-Ferrara's campaign and Maggie Ullman Berthum's campaigns if you want to check them out. And if you are local and you're inspired to help get out the vote, which is the name of the game in these last weeks, you can go visit their websites and get involved. And if you are not in Western North Carolina, I hope you will get involved in your local elections. Who is running for city, for county, for state where you live? The Supreme Court has made it very clear that a lot of issues are going to get bounced back to the states now. So they have just said to you explicitly how important state politics are in your life. And so I hope we all, no matter how we feel about the current Supreme Court, I hope we all take that message very seriously because it is true. So all right, both of you, thank you so much for being here. I am so inspired by your visions. I'm inspired by your work ethic and just the way that you're running these incredible campaigns. So thank you both here for being here, for speaking to everybody, and thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review. It really helps, and share it with a friend. I'm so grateful. This podcast is for education and entertainment only. Nothing in this episode should be taken as individual tax or financial advice. You can find all the tools, books, and links we reference at sunlighttax.com/podcast.